Specific organisations backing us include the Scottish Parent Teacher Council. They represent parents across Scotland who've got pupils at state schools. Schoolhouse, of course, representing homeschoolers, and you've just heard from Alison. Care for Scotland, the Times Trust, who work with ME sufferers, and you heard Leslie Scott on the video, who represents them, and my own organisation, the Christian Institute. And the aim behind our campaign is really to raise awareness of this policy that has already been passed by Parliament, because we're convinced an awful lot of parents don't know about it yet, and when they do know about it, they're very, very unhappy. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why people are opposed to this, and I think the four core ones would be, firstly, that it undermines families. Introducing a state-employed individual, a named person, by definition, undermines the role of parents and carers, the vast majority of whom have no desire or need for third-party involvement of that particular sort. And to quote the faculty of advocates, who really know what they're talking about here, they say, by making indiscriminate provision for possible interference in the lives of all children, rather than providing for focused intervention when the need arises, the bill risks enshrining a structure that has the potential to be used to undermine families. Secondly, the policy represents a huge waste of resources. It's almost inevitable that by stretching resources to police the well-being of all children, attention will be diverted away from genuine cases of neglect or abuse, shifting the focus from the welfare of the vulnerable children to the well-being of all children merely risks swamping the system. And that's what happened in the Isle of Man, where a similar scheme was launched. And that then made the whole system totally ineffective. There's a particular concern that teachers, who of course will account for the vast majority of named persons, are taking on this massive new responsibility without any obvious increase in resource. Third reason is that by granting the named person sweeping legal responsibility to monitor the well-being of all children, there's a very, very real danger that families will be needlessly dragged into the system, because a named person takes issue with a particular parent and the way that parent does things. Families who the authorities may regard as unconventional, such as those who homeschool or who have strong religious views, or for all sorts of reasons, may be singled out for targeted intervention. And of course, the infamous Orkney case of the early 1990s just shows how devastating the effects can be when the authorities do get things wrong. And the fourth and final reason is, as has already been mentioned, it's our contention that the policy is illegal, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Very important to say, the campaign is not saying that there's no place for a robust and focused and effective child protection system. Of course there is, and we're certainly not questioning the motives of the majority of professionals in this field who do a thoroughly good job. What we are saying is that a universal, and that's what it is, a universal named person system is absolutely not the way to go, and it is wide open to very serious abuse. So, because the Children and Young People Scotland Act has now cleared Parliament, the only way to stop it, as has already been said, is through the courts. And for that reason, my own organisation, the Christian Institute, are leading several other bodies in a judicial review in the Scottish courts in an effort to reverse or at least lessen the impact of the named person scheme. Now, that's not been taken lightly at all. It's based on very robust legal advice that we've received from Aidan O'Neill QC, who is a leading expert in this field. And I'd encourage you to take away a copy of the legal opinion. It's very readable. There's copies at the back, so please do take one with you. And he believes, Aidan O'Neill believes, that the policy may be illegal under Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And here's what he says, and it's worth listening to this. This is chilling. He says, what is startling about the proposed legislative scheme for a named person service is that it appears to be predicated on the idea that the proper primary relationship that children will have for their well-being and development, nurturing and education, is with the state rather than with their families and parents. I consider that the provisions of the bill, which would require the appointment of a named person to every child in Scotland without exception, may not be lawful on the basis that the blanket nature of this provision constitutes a disproportionate and unjustified interference with the right to respect for individual families' private and family life and home. And he says in particular that there is a lack of proper protection against the possible arbitrary and oppressive use of the powers which would be accorded to state bodies, such as the nominated person, under this legislation. So the legal papers were lodged in the Court of Session in Edinburgh on July the 9th, with a case due to be heard later this year. So finally, how can you help us? Well, there's 5 areas I'm going to cover very, very briefly. The first really is just campaigning to raise awareness of this campaign. That's so important. We've produced this leaflet here. We have lots of these sitting at the back. We have lots more available. Please take a pile of these away with you tonight. Hand them out anywhere you like. These encourage people to sign up to the campaign as supporters, and you do that by visiting the website. And if there's anybody here who's not done that, then please do sign up. And on the website, you can watch a version of that video, a longer version of the video you've already seen. And I think that's the most effective way of getting the message out there, listening to parents who've experienced this agenda already. We're also keen to perhaps organise campaign events, maybe collecting signatures in the street, in the town centre, handing out leaflets. If that is something you think you could help with, maybe acting as a local coordinator, point of contact for us here in Inverness or wherever you are, then I'm going to place some of these brand new forms on the back at the table. If you'd like to help in that way, if you could sign one, fill it in and hand it to one of us, that would be great. Secondly, funding. The campaign is wholly reliant on funds provided by the supportive organisations. The vast bulk, of course, is required for our judicial review. And though, as I understand it, the funds for the first stage have been gathered, it's anyone's guess how long this could run through the courts. So if you are in a position to help in that way, there are these envelopes at the back as well, which you'll find on the table. Third way to help is to contact your MSPs, especially if you're represented by a Scottish Government Minister. And of course, we are here in Fergus Ewing's constituency tonight. Very important that you go and speak to your MSPs, as I say, particularly if they're a minister, because whilst the bill's already been passed, it's still up to the Scottish Government to decide on exactly how it will be implemented officially in 2016 via guidance. And it's just so important that the politicians understand that there is increasing public anger about this, not least because the Children's and Young People's Act, when it was passed, dealt with a huge number of issues, not just this particular piece of policy. And so many people were really unaware that this was hidden in there with all the other things in that bill. Fourth way you can help is engaging with the media. Very well known, of course, that letters pages in local papers and regional papers are very well read. So I would encourage you, if you can, to put pen to paper or to drop an email to one of the newspapers. And we do have these engaging with the media guides, which are very helpful. It's also on the website. And again, I'll put those at the back. This issue is discussed from time to time on radio phone-ins. So if that's something you think you can do as well, if you do hear it being discussed on the radio, pick up the phone. Anne Cannon, who was on the video, the lady in Glasgow, one of the first people to speak, she got involved that way. She heard this issue being discussed on the radio and was so incensed by what she heard that she stopped the car and phoned in. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, if there's anybody here, and of course we are in Inverness, we're in the Highland Council area where the infamous pilot ran. If there is anybody here that has any experiences at all of the named person scheme and the associated child well-being GIRFIC agenda, please speak to us and let us know your stories, and that would be really, really helpful to our campaign.